He didn't come here to win a fair fight. He came to watch the very concept of strength crumble under the weight of a single, calculated movement. That scream isn't just pain. It's the sound of a worldview shattering in real time. You can see the moment the hunter realizes he's become the most helpless thing in the room. The dust hasn't even settled, but the hierarchy has already inverted. Notice how he stands, not with the posture of a victor, but with the chilling indifference of a man who knew this was the only possible outcome. Confusion is the first stage of defeat. By the time they understand the mechanics of what just happened, the opportunity to counter has already passed them by. Look at the eyes. Most viewers focus on the impact, but the real story is in that flickering moment of doubt before the next blow even lands. The metal groans, but the silence that follows is far heavier. It's the sound of absolute authority being established without a single word of explanation. He's not just fighting an opponent, he's deconstructing a reputation. Every strike is a clinical erasure of everything they thought they knew about power. This is the detail most people miss. He's not breathing hard. While his enemy is burning through a lifetime of adrenaline, he is simply executing a sequence. The environment itself seems to shrink around them. It's a psychological claustrophobia, the realization that there is nowhere left to run where his shadow won't reach first. Pay attention to this panel. You will not see this expression again. It's the last vestige of mercy leaving his face, replaced by a cold architectural necessity. He's baiting them. It looks like a lapse in concentration, but if you've been watching closely, you know he never makes the same mistake twice. The ground gives way, a physical manifestation of the instability he's introduced into the fight. He isn't just breaking bones, he's breaking the logic of the arena. This is the panel that broke the fandom. The sheer audacity of his positioning here defies every established rule of engagement we've seen in this series so far. Speed is an illusion when you can predict the destination. He doesn't need to be faster. He just needs to be waiting at the exact point where his opponent's hope dies. Notice the shift in the color palette of the shadows. The darkness isn't just an artistic choice. It's a reflection of the internal state he's forcing his enemy to inhabit. He lets him breathe for a second, not out of kindness, but to ensure the victim is fully conscious for the next phase of the escalation. Only readers who caught the setup 3 chapters ago understand what just happened. That subtle twitch of the left hand wasn't a reflex, it was a trigger. The impact is secondary to the aftermath. The way the debris settles tells you everything you need to know about the sheer force of the kinetic energy he just unleashed. He steps over the threshold. It's a symbolic transition, leaving behind the role of the challenger and assuming the mantle of the inevitable. If you feel a knot in your stomach right now, it's because you've realized what he's actually calculating here. This isn't a finishing move, it's a setup for something much worse. The reflection in the blade reveals more than the character's face. It shows the moment his soul catches up to the violence he's committed. Every movement is shorter now, more efficient. The frantic energy of the beginning has been compressed into a diamond-hard focus that leaves no room for error. They think they've found a weakness. They've actually just stepped into the exact center of his web, and the thread is about to pull tight. The flicker of light in the distance is a lie. There is no rescue coming. There is only the immediate, crushing reality of his presence. He's not looking at his opponent anymore. He's looking through him, toward the next obstacle, as if this entire life-and-death struggle was merely a distraction. The tension is so thick it's physical. Every panel feels like a held breath, waiting for the one variable that will finally break the stalemate. And just when you think you understand this character, he does that. A choice so contrary to his nature that it redefines every action he's taken since the first page. The weapon is irrelevant. His hands are merely the tools. The real destruction is happening in the silence between the strikes. Everything before this was set up. This is what it was building toward, the moment where the mask slips and we see the true face of the monster they provoked. He looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the man staring back. The world remembers Legion as a scarred, broken remnant of a hero, a face totally messed up by the weight of a world that moved on without him. But this reflection is a contradiction. It is smooth, predatory, and dangerously handsome. If the face is different, the legend is effectively dead, which is exactly the kind of shield a man needs when he plans to burn everything down. The public assumes the scars define him, but you're seeing the birth of a new ghost. He's no longer the tragedy they pitied. He's the variable they can't calculate. The atmosphere in the city shifted the moment he stepped onto the pavement. The recent situation haven't been good, but the common citizen thinks it's just politics or monster sightings. They don't realize the air is heavy because the apex predator just returned to the watering hole. Rumors are like wildfire, and the whisper that Legion is back is currently incinerating the peace of the elite. For 20 years, they built a civilization on the assumption he was rotting in a hole. Now, that assumption is a noose tightening around their collective necks. Look at the way he moves through the crowd, unseen, yet completely dominant. He isn't hiding, he's calibrating his presence to match the frequency of a world that has forgotten how to fear him. The silence in this panel is a warning most people would miss. He stands before the massive displays of the 12 zodiacs, the heroes who took his place and his credit. To the world, these are gods. To him, they are just debt collectors who haven't been paid in full yet. Every step he takes is a psychological reclamation. He is visiting the places where his name was erased, not out of nostalgia, but to see exactly how much they owe him for the theft of his life. You can see it in his eyes. He isn't looking for a home. He's looking for a target. The registration office is a comedy of bureaucracy, where heroes are measured by stamps and papers. They treat him like a nuisance, another wannabe looking for a scrap of glory. They have no idea they are currently filing the paperwork for their own destruction. This is the moment most viewers miss, the subtle twitch in the clerk's hand when Jin speaks. He doesn't need to shout to be the loudest person in the room. His presence is a physical weight, a pressure that suggests the floor might just give way if he loses patience. He's testing the new power system, and it's like watching a grandmaster play against toddlers. The technology they use to measure divine power wasn't built for a man who survived the abyss. It's built for the soft, pampered successors who followed him. The machine begins to whine, a high-pitched protest against a power level it wasn't programmed to register. You've seen this trope before, but this isn't about a high score. It's about the fact that the entire infrastructure of this society is literally too small to contain him. He's looking at the results with a smirk that should terrify anyone who sees it. He knows exactly what the numbers mean, and more importantly, he knows how he's going to use them to manipulate the people currently looking down on him. The high-ranking officials are starting to take notice, their monitors flashing with error, messages they can't explain. They're trying to rationalize it as a glitch because the alternative, that a legend has returned to reclaim his throne, is too expensive to contemplate. Pay attention to the way he interacts with the younger hunters in the lobby. He's a relic of a brutal age teaching them, through silence, that their modern training is a joke. Only those who have been following since the beginning know the sheer depth of the gap between them. He's baiting them now, playing the part of the arrogant newcomer just enough to draw the right people out of the shadows. It's a performance. He's a hunter setting a trap, and the elite are walking into it with their chests puffed out. The first physical confrontation is less of a fight and more of a correction. He doesn't even use his full strength. He just exploits the flaws in their technique that have developed over 20 years of laziness and ego. One move, and the hierarchy of the room is shattered. The realization is starting to dawn on the spectators. This isn't just a strong guy. This is a force of nature wearing a human suit. This is the panel that broke the fandom when it first dropped, because for the first time, the heavenly power they worship looks like a flickering candle next to his son. He stands over the fallen, his expression one of bored disappointment. He expected more from the world that claimed to have surpassed him. The superiority of the current age is a lie, and he just tore the veil. Notice the shadow behind him. It's longer, darker, and more jagged than it should be. The abyss didn't just let him go, it followed him back, and it's hungry for the things he's about to feed it. A high-level representative of a zodiac temple approaches him, and for a second, the air literally turns cold. This is the first real move from the big players. They think they're offering him a chance, They don't realize they're begging for mercy they won't get. He rejects the offer before it's even fully voiced. He isn't interested in being a pawn in their game. He's here to flip the table and burn the room. The disrespect is calculated. He wants them to send their best so he can break them publicly. As he walks away, he leaves behind a room full of people who are suddenly, violently aware of their own mortality. You're watching a man convince himself that he's doing this for justice, but the look on his face says it's purely for the satisfaction of the kill. He finds a quiet corner to check his stats, and the interface is flickering with icons that shouldn't exist. He's evolving past the system's ability to track him. This is the seed that will detonate in the coming chapters. The scene shifts to the High Council of the Zodiacs. They are terrified. They are debating whether to kill him or recruit him, unaware that neither option is actually on the table anymore. Their arrogance is their only remaining defense mechanism. He looks up at the sky at the constellations that supposedly rule this world. He isn't praying to them. He's marking them. One by one, he's deciding which star to extinguish first. He meets an old acquaintance, or rather, someone who thinks they knew him. The tension here is thick enough to choke on. They're looking for the Legion they betrayed, but they're standing in front of something far more dangerous. Do you really think a new face changes who I am? He doesn't say it, but the way he holds his gaze forces them to see the truth. The past isn't dead. It's just had a makeover. He receives a notification on his device, a direct challenge, or perhaps a summons to the very place where everything went wrong 20 years ago. He doesn't hesitate. He's been waiting for this invitation since the day he was left for dead. Everything before this was set up. This is what it was building toward, the moment he stops playing and starts hunting. He's moving toward the exit, and you can almost feel the weight of the city shifting as he prepares to strike. He reaches for the handle of the door but stops. His eyes narrow as he senses someone, or something, waiting on the other side that shouldn't be there. The screen goes black just as the first drop of blood hits the floor, leaving one question burning in the silence. Who was actually hunting whom? He was never meant to return. The name Lee Gun was supposed to be a relic, a ghost story told to keep the survivors in line. But look closely at the reaction of those who remember. That isn't respect you're seeing. It's pure, unadulterated terror. Names have power, especially when they belong to a man who was left for dead in the deepest pit imaginable. When Lee Gun stands there, the air in the room doesn't just get colder, it gets heavier, as if the world itself is recalibrating to his presence. Hyung, a word that should carry warmth, yet here it sounds like a death sentence. The realization hitting his face isn't about a reunion. It's the sudden, violent understanding that the lies of the last 20 years are about to be dismantled. Notice how his shadow stretches further than it should. It's a subtle detail, but it signals that the Lee Gun who walked into that tower isn't the same entity that crawled back out. He isn't rushing. Why would he? When you have already conquered the end of the world, a few terrified bureaucrats and traitors are barely worth the effort of a sprint. The weapon in his hand feels like an extension of his own spite. It wasn't found. It was forged in the kind of isolation that breaks lesser gods, and now he's looking for a place to test its edge. Look at the way the others create distance. They aren't just moving away. They are instinctively trying to exit his line of sight, as if being noticed by him is a terminal diagnosis. You can see the calculations running behind his eyes. He isn't looking for a fight. He's looking for the specific thread that, when pulled, will cause their entire fragile empire to unravel in his hands. This is the moment where the power dynamic shifts irrevocably. The authorities think they are interrogating a survivor, but Lee Gun is actually the one conducting the autopsy of their lives. Silence can be louder than a scream. While the others scramble for explanations and excuses, Lee Gun simply watches, letting the weight of his survival do the heavy lifting. The arrogance on the faces of the elite is starting to crack. They spent decades convinced their betrayal was perfect, never imagining the victim would return to collect the debt. Pay attention to his hands. They are perfectly still. In a room full of trembling heroes, the only person who is truly calm is the one they all fear the most. This is the panel the community has been debating since it first appeared. It's the first time we see a flicker of the true malice he brought back from the abyss, and it's far darker than anyone anticipated. He's playing a game they don't even know exists. By the time they realize the rules have changed, Lee Gun will have already claimed the prize. If you've been paying attention to the lore, you know that mark on his neck shouldn't be there. It's a signature of a power that predates the towers, and he's wearing it like a trophy. The escalation here is mechanical and cold. He doesn't need to shout to dominate the room. He just needs to exist, a living reminder of their greatest collective sin. Every step he takes vibrates with a sense of inevitability. The architecture of the building seems to groan under the pressure of a man who refused to stay buried. You're witnessing a masterclass in psychological warfare. He's giving them just enough hope to make the eventual realization of their helplessness even more devastating. The hidden motive is finally surfacing. He didn't come back for an apology or even for his old life. He came back to see what kind of world grew in the soil of his sacrifice. The tension is a physical thing now, a coiled spring waiting for the slightest provocation. One wrong word, one aggressive gesture, and the miracle of his return becomes a massacre. He looks at the icons of this new era with a pity that is more insulting than hatred. To Lee Gun, these modern legends are nothing more than children playing with matches in a house he built. The compression of the narrative reaches its peak here. No more dialogue, just the suffocating reality that the hierarchy of this world has been decapitated in a single afternoon. Only the most observant viewers will notice the reflection in the glass. It isn't Lee Gun looking back. It's the thing he had to become to survive those 20 years of hell. The final realization is starting to sink in for his enemies. They didn't just lose a hero 20 years ago. They created a monster that has finally come home to roost. As the lights flicker and the atmosphere densifies, the question shifts from how did he survive to what did he bring back with him? He turns toward the camera, toward us, with a look that suggests he knows exactly who was watching his descent and who profited from his absence. The door begins to open, revealing a figure that shouldn't be able to stand in his presence. The air stops moving entirely. The screen fades as he utters a single name that changes the context of every action he's taken since page 1, leaving us to wonder, who was the real traitor all along? She thinks she's being clear, but the correction feels more like a confession. Calling herself anything other than a crazy bitch doesn't change the fact that Lee Gun is the only name on her lips. The sound that follows isn't human. It's the raw, unhinged noise of someone who has lost the ability to pretend. You can see the shift in her eyes here. The moment the mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. Desperation has a specific frequency, and she's hitting every note. This isn't just a scream. It's a refusal to accept a reality where she isn't the center of his world. Look closely at the background. The environment is becoming as chaotic as her mental state, a visual echo of internal collapse. He hasn't said a word yet, but his silence is doing more damage than any insult ever could. He's treating her like a ghost, and for someone like her, invisibility is a death sentence. Notice the way her hands are trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of holding back what she really wants to do. You've seen this look before in people who have nothing left to lose. Power dynamic is shifting, and she's the only one who hasn't realized she's already lost the leverage she thought she had. Every step he takes away from her feels like a physical blow. She's measuring the distance in heartbeats, and she's running out of time. This is where the calculation starts to fail. She thought she knew his breaking point, but she's realizing he doesn't have one. Not for her. The shadow across his face isn't just a lighting choice. It's the boundary of a world she's no longer allowed to enter. If you've been paying attention to the way he avoids her gaze, you'll realize he isn't disgusted. He's indifferent. And indifference is the one thing she can't manipulate. She's reaching for a weapon that isn't there, a metaphorical grasp for control that only highlights her impotence. The dialogue is a distraction. Pay attention to the spacing between them. The void is growing, and she's the only one trying to bridge it. A single choice is made here that reframes every interaction they've had up to this point. Most people miss it because they're looking at the action, not the intent. She's trying to rewrite the narrative in real time, But the facts are starting to catch up to her lies. He finally looks at her, and it's the most devastating moment of the chapter. Not because of anger, but because of the absolute lack of it. The realization is setting in. She isn't the protagonist of this story. She's just an obstacle he's already moved past. Her smile here is a defense mechanism. A jagged edge meant to keep the truth from cutting too deep. This is the panel that broke the fandom. The subtext is finally becoming text, and it's uglier than anyone anticipated. You're watching someone convince themselves of a victory that hasn't happened yet. It's a masterclass in self-delusion. The tension is no longer rising, it's compressing. Every word feels like a heavy weight being added to a structure that's already buckling. He moves, she doesn't mistake. Only readers who caught the setup from earlier understand why his hand is positioned exactly like that. It's not a gesture, it's a trap. The psychological weight of this silence is unbearable. He's letting her drown in her own words. She's grasping at memories like they're life rafts. But he's already burned the bridge to the past. Look at the way the light hits his eyes. There is no warmth left, only a cold, mechanical assessment of her utility. This is the turning point. She thinks she's found a weakness, but she's actually just walked into his line of fire. Every sentence from here on is a countdown. The air in the room has changed, and she's the only one still breathing normally. He says her name, and for a second she thinks she's won. But you know better. Everything before this was set up. This is what it was building toward. He was moving so fast the world became a blur of static, a thief convinced that physics was his only judge. He didn't realize that in this world, speed is just a loud way of being caught. The air in the march shifted, heavy with the realization that every wallet and watch was already gone before the victims could blink. He wasn't just stealing money, he was stealing the security of every person in the room. Panic began to set in among the crowd. A collective breath held as they realized their vulnerability. They were looking for a man, but they were fighting a blur that treated their lives like a grocery list. He laughed at the idea of authority, convinced that no Templar could bridge the gap between human reaction and divine velocity. It's the classic mistake of the gifted, assuming your ceiling is everyone else's floor. The hall was complete, or so he thought, as he prepared to vanish into the city's veins with his prizes. He felt the weight of the stolen goods, but he failed to feel the shift in the room's temperature. One word shattered his momentum. A verbal anchor dropped into a sea of high-speed ego. Gotcha isn't just a statement here. It's the sound of a trap closing that he never even saw being built. The impact wasn't physical at first, but a sudden, violent realization that his speed had been accounted for. You can see the moment his confidence fractures, replaced by the cold logic of someone who finally met their match. He tried to pivot, to find a secondary gear that didn't exist, but his legs refused to obey the panic in his brain. The visual of his struggle is a masterclass in how powerlessness feels when it's preceded by absolute hubris. Silence fell over the mart as the thief was pinned, not by a fist, but by the overwhelming presence of a superior force. Notice how the crowd doesn't cheer. They just watch, frozen by the proximity of two powers they can't comprehend. The Templar didn't even look winded, a calculated display of dominance that makes the thief's frantic efforts look like a child's tantrum. This is the detail most people miss. The winner wasn't trying, and that's the real insult. Look at the thief's eyes as the reality of his situation sinks in. This wasn't a failed heist. It was a guided tour into his own limitations. If you've been watching closely, you'll realize the Templar was waiting at the exit before the first wallet was even taken. The interrogation began before a single question was asked, conducted entirely through the weight of the Templar's gaze. The thief is trying to calculate a way out, but he's playing a game whose rules were changed 5 minutes ago. A secondary figure emerged from the shadows of the mart, someone whose presence reframes the entire confrontation as a mere test. This is the moment the narrative shifts from a simple crime to a complex recruitment or execution. Pay attention to this panel. The way the light hits the floor suggests they aren't alone, and the thief is starting to realize he was just the bait. You're watching a man discover he's the smallest fish in a very dark pond. The tension isn't about the stolen goods anymore. It's about what the thief saw while he was moving between the seconds. He has information he doesn't even know is valuable yet, a detail that will haunt him by the end of the hour. Every movement in this scene is deliberate, a choreographed dance of intimidation designed to break a man who thought he was untouchable. The speedster is now the slowest person in the room, trapped in a timeline he can't control. There's a flicker of something in the Templar's expression, not pity, but a weary recognition of a pattern that's about to repeat. Only viewers who caught the setup in previous encounters understand the significance of that slight frown. The thief tries to bargain, offering up names and locations as if currency could buy back the seconds he lost. It's a desperate play, and the Templar's lack of response is the most terrifying answer possible. A new threat revealed itself, not through action, but through the sudden, unexplained collapse of the mart's perimeter. This is the panel that broke the fandom, forcing everyone to reconsider who the actual antagonist of this arc is. Dust and debris filtered through the air, creating a veil between the thief and his captors as the external force moved in. The psychological weight shifts from the thief's guilt to the Templar's sudden, sharp instinct for survival. He reached for a weapon that wasn't there, a phantom limb response from a man who usually relies on his legs to solve every problem. You can feel the air leave the room as the secondary player finally steps into the light. The conversation turned toward a prophecy or a plan that predates everyone in this room, casting the heist as a minor footnote. Notice what he doesn't say. The silence regarding the true speed is the real threat here. The thief is forgotten as the two titans face off, his relevance evaporated in the heat of a much older grudge. He's safe for now, but in this world, being ignored by the powerful is often a death sentence of its own. Words were exchanged that sounded like rituals, a linguistic bridge to a power level that makes the earlier speed look like crawling. Everything before this was set up. This is what the chapter was actually building toward. The Templar's stance shifted, a micro-adjustment that signals a total change in strategy for the coming conflict. You've seen this pattern before. He hasn't, and the consequences of that ignorance are about to be catastrophic. The floor beneath them began to vibrate, a physical manifestation of the hidden motive finally breaking through the surface reality. The thief looks at us, the viewers, as if realizing for the first time that we are witnessing his end. The light in the room died, leaving only the glow of eyes that shouldn't be human and a question that wasn't meant to be answered. The air is thick with the scent of ozone, and the realization that the mart was never the target. He took the step, and as his foot touched the shadow, the world didn't just blur, it vanished entirely. He didn't hesitate. Most would have weighed the cost, but for him, the calculation was already complete. The air in the room shifted before anyone else realized the balance of power had just been permanently altered. The silence following his first move is heavier than the action itself. Look at the way the others are standing. They aren't just shocked, they're realizing they misread the entire board. It wasn't about winning the moment. It was about making sure there was no next move for his opponent. He's playing a game they haven't even been invited to yet. Notice the subtle tremor in his opponent's grip. You've seen this kind of desperation before. The look of a man who realized he brought a knife to a psychological execution. The environment starts to feel restrictive, the framing of the panels tightening as the pressure mounts. Every word spoken now is a tactical error he is simply waiting to exploit. He offers a choice that isn't really a choice at all. It's the illusion of agency, a classic trap designed to make the victim complicit in their own downfall. This is the detail most people miss. He never actually looked at the weapon. His eyes stayed fixed on the only thing that mattered, the fear behind his enemy's pupils. The surface reality is a confrontation, but the hidden motive is much darker. He isn't looking for an apology. He's looking for a reason to never have to deal with this person again. Friction enters the plan as an outside variable intervenes. A new face, a new threat, or perhaps just a reminder that even the best architects can't account for every shadow. His expression remains a mask of indifference. It's a terrifying level of control, the kind that suggests he's already lived through this outcome 1,000 times in his head. The dialogue slows down, the sentences shortening as the physical distance between them closes. One breath, one mistake. That's all it takes to end a legacy. Pay attention to this panel. You will not see this level of vulnerability from him again, and yet he uses it as just another layer of his armor. They think they have him cornered. It's a narrative we've seen before, but the irony is that they're the ones standing in the middle of his kill zone. The community has been arguing about this specific turning point since it dropped. Is it a moment of growth, or the final step into the abyss? He moves, they don't. Mistake. The speed isn't the point, it's the absolute certainty of his trajectory that leaves them frozen. You're watching a man convince himself of a lie so he can survive the truth. The internal dialogue is a frantic reconstruction of his own morality. The stakes just doubled. What started as a personal vendetta has spiraled into something that could dismantle the entire hierarchy of this world. Everything before this was set up. This is the reason the chapter exists. The mask doesn't just slip, it shatters, revealing the person he's been hiding since the first page. Short, sharp strikes, no wasted energy. He isn't fighting, he's harvesting the consequences of their arrogance. The lighting shifts, casting long, jagged shadows that mirror the fractured state of the room. The atmosphere is so thick you can almost hear the heartbeat of the person about to lose everything. Only readers who caught the setup 10 pages ago understand what that small object in his hand actually represents. It's not a tool, it's a death warrant. He stands amidst the wreckage of their expectations. It's a lonely victory, the kind that leaves a bitter taste and a trail of questions that no one is brave enough to ask. The pace accelerates, the panels blur. The tension is no longer rising, it's vibrating. We are reaching the limit of what this situation can sustain. A single line of dialogue reframes the last 20 pages. Suddenly, the hero isn't the hero, and the victim isn't as innocent as they seemed. He turns his back on the chaos. It's the ultimate insult, to not even acknowledge the damage you've caused because the result was never in doubt. Wait for it. The realization on their faces is the only reward he ever wanted. The slow-motion collapse of an ego is a cinematic masterpiece. And just when you think you understand this character, he does something that makes you question everything. A gesture of mercy, or a deeper, more calculated cruelty. The final pieces are falling into place. The trap is closing, but the person at the center of it is the only one smiling. He looks toward the horizon, or perhaps toward a future he's already paved in blood. The transition is seamless, the quiet returning like a predator to its den. The cliffhanger isn't a cliff, it's a doorway. He's stepping through, and what lies on the other side makes the current carnage look like child's play. A shadow appears in the doorway, a familiar silhouette, but the way they're holding themselves says they aren't the person he remembers. The supermarket in Buchan City wasn't supposed to be a graveyard, but reality rarely respects a plan. Most people see a grocery store. Those who know the truth see a breach point for something ancient and starving. Panic is a secondary emotion for those in charge. Their first instinct is always data acquisition. He doesn't ask if people are dying. He asks what specific nightmare is killing them. The name, the Spider Queen, is more than a title. It's a death sentence for anyone who remembers the last encounter. You can see the shift in the air, the kind of stillness that precedes a total collapse of order. Every barely in a hunter's career is a debt that eventually comes due with interest. They didn't defeat her. They just delayed the inevitable. And now the clock has finally run out. Notice how the shadows in this aisle don't match the overhead lighting. If you've been paying attention to the spatial distortion, you already know the Spider Queen isn't coming. She's already there. There is a specific kind of silence that occurs when a predator stops moving to calculate its first strike. It's not peace. It's the vacuum created by an approaching catastrophe. He thinks he's looking for a monster, but he's actually looking at the reflection of his own previous incompetence. The debris isn't just structural. It's symbolic of a guild that thought they were stronger than the abyss. You're watching a man try to convince himself that a second chance is a gift rather than a final execution. His hand is steady, but his eyes are searching for an exit that no longer exists in this reality. This is the moment the atmospheric pressure drops, signaling that the Spider Queen is no longer a name on a report. The weight of her presence is physical, turning the air into something thick, web-like, and suffocating. Look closely at the way the light fractures against the silk threads. Most viewers miss the fact that they are already surrounded. The trap wasn't set when he walked in. It was set the moment the seal was first placed months ago. He finally realizes that the Spider Queen isn't a monster you fight with a sword. She is an environmental shift. You don't kill a storm, you just try to survive the wreckage it leaves behind. The social proof of his past failures is etched into the scars he tries to hide under his gear. The community of survivors knows what he did, or rather, what he failed to do, and they aren't cheering for his return. Tension isn't a loud noise. It's the sound of a single thread snapping in a room full of webs. That sound is the only warning he gets before the geometry of the room changes entirely. He makes a choice here that contradicts every protocol he was taught as a rookie. Survival has a way of stripping away the rules until all that's left is a desperate, ugly instinct. The Queen doesn't reveal herself all at once because she doesn't have to. Fear does half her work for her. She is playing with the concept of his memory, feeding him images of the raid that broke his spirit. Pay attention to the floor. The movement isn't coming from the ceiling, which is where everyone expects a spider. The most dangerous threats are the ones that have been under your feet the entire time. He's breathing too fast, and in this environment, oxygen is a luxury he can't afford to waste. Every exhale is a signal, a vibration through the web that tells her exactly where his heart is beating. This is the panel that broke the fandom when it first leaked. The realization that the Queen isn't alone. Behind the primary threat lies a hierarchy of hunger that he isn't equipped to handle. His weapon feels heavy now, not because of its weight, but because of the futility it represents. You're watching a man realize that his best isn't just insufficient, it's irrelevant. The first strike isn't a physical blow, it's a psychological rupture that forces him to relive his worst mistake. She isn't just killing his body, she's dismantling the narrative he built to stay sane. Darkness in this chapter isn't the absence of light. It's a sentient layer of the Queen's will. It moves with intent, closing off the exits one by one until the supermarket becomes a digestive tract. He finds a remnant of the last raid, a piece of equipment that shouldn't be here. It's a curiosity gap that reframes the entire mission. Someone was here before him, and they didn't leave. The escalation is no longer linear. It's exponential, as the sealed power begins to leak through the cracks of the world. This isn't a battle anymore. It's a containment failure on a global scale. Notice the twitch in his left eye. It's the same one he had before the disaster in the previous volume. If you've been following the series, you know this is the physiological sign that he's about to lose control. She finally speaks, but not with words. The sound is a psychic frequency that turns his own memories against him. It's the ultimate superior framing. She knows his history better than he does. The blood on the floor isn't his, which is almost more terrifying than if it were. It belongs to the hope he had of coming out of this clean, a hope that is currently being dissolved in venom. He reaches for a trump card that he swore he would never use again. The cost of this power is a loss of humanity, but in this room, being human is the greatest liability he has. The transformation is slow, painful, and utterly necessary for the violence that needs to follow. You aren't watching a hero rise. You're watching a man sacrifice his soul to win a fight he already lost. Impact. The screen shatters, the webs tear, and for a brief second the power dynamic is reversed. But look at the Queen's eyes. She isn't afraid. She's intrigued by the monster he's becoming. Everything before this was set up. This is what the entire Butchin arc was building toward. The collision of two apex predators in a space meant for selling bread and milk is the ultimate irony. His movement is a blur, a frantic attempt to end the encounter before the cost of his power consumes him. Every second he spends in this state is a second he loses from his own future. Silence returns, but it's heavier now, flavored with the scent of ozone and copper. The supermarket is gone, replaced by a nest of white silk and broken promises. He stands in the center of the wreckage, but he's looking at his hands as if they belong to a stranger. You've seen this look before. It's the realization that the thing he killed isn't nearly as dangerous as the thing he's become. A shadow moves in the corner of the frame, something far larger than the queen they just fought. The seal didn't just break for one monster. It was a doorway for the entire hive. He hears a voice that shouldn't exist, a voice from the failed raid that was supposed to be dead. This single detail reframes every action he's taken since the beginning of the chapter. The screen fades to black as the first true weaver steps out from the darkness of the freezer section. If stopping now feels like a loss, it's because you finally understand what's actually at stake. He didn't just move. He vanished from their perception, reappearing only when the realization of their own mortality finally caught up to them. You can see it in their eyes. That split second where arrogance dissolves into a primal, gut-wrenching fear of the unknown. It wasn't a tactical retreat or a calculated strike, but a complete erasure of the distance they thought kept them safe. The atmosphere doesn't just shift, it curdles, turning the very air they breathe into a heavy, suffocating weight that hammers home their insignificance. Notice how the shadows seem to bleed from his silhouette, as if the world itself is recoiling from the violence about to be unleashed. Most viewers focus on the weapon, but the real threat is the complete lack of hesitation in his posture. A man who has already decided they are dead. He calls them scavengers, but the insult carries a deeper, more clinical observation of their desperation and lack of discipline. There is a specific kind of contempt reserved for those who treat human life as a resource, and you're seeing it manifest in real time. They came here expecting a feast, never realizing they were the ones being led to the slaughter by a predator who doesn't even consider them a challenge. The question isn't whether they are hungry, but how they could be so blind to the apex predator standing right in front of them. Pay attention to the way he speaks. It's not a shout of anger, but a low, vibrating judgment that echoes through the silence of the room. The first strike is always the quietest, a surgical precision that leaves no room for a counterargument or a scream. You've seen this pattern before in others, but here, the fluid motion suggests a level of muscle memory that only comes from a lifetime of ending things. Look closely at the background characters. They aren't moving because their brains haven't yet processed the speed of the execution they just witnessed. This is the panel that broke the fandom, where the power scaling isn't just teased, but definitively rewritten with a single, effortless motion. If you've been watching since the beginning, you already feel what this means. The rules of engagement have just been permanently discarded. He stands in the center of the wreckage, not with the exhaustion of a victor, but with the cold indifference of a man who expected nothing less. The blood on the floor creates a mirror, reflecting a version of him that he usually keeps buried beneath layers of forced restraint. Only readers who caught the setup 3 chapters ago understand that this specific strike was a direct response to a debt they didn't even know they owed. Tension doesn't break here. It compresses, pulling the remaining enemies into a tight, frantic circle of doomed survival instincts. He watches them scramble, finding a dark irony in the way they suddenly value the lives they were so willing to throw away moments ago. The detail most people miss. His hand never moved back to a defensive position because he knows there is no one left capable of reaching him. A new shadow enters the frame, one that doesn't carry the same scent of desperation as the others, shifting the gravity of the entire room. You're watching a man convince himself he's ready for what's coming next. Even as his pulse betrays the lie, he's telling his own heart. The silence that follows is more deafening than the previous carnage, a vacuum waiting for the next catastrophe to fill it. This isn't a face-off. It's a recognition of a shared darkness that makes the previous violence look like child's play. Everything before this was set up. This is what it was building toward, the moment the hunter realizes he might actually be the prey. He doesn't draw his sword again, and that single choice creates an anxiety that lingers long after the page is turned. He isn't just wearing a stolen uniform. He's wearing a provocation that most people would consider a death warrant. The accusations are loud, but his silence is louder. Every second he doesn't deny it, the air in the room gets heavier. Look at the way they're surrounding him. They think they've trapped a thief, but they haven't noticed his hands haven't even tightened on his weapon. Most viewers will focus on the distance between them. You should focus on the fact that he isn't looking at their blades, he's looking at their feet. An S-class relic like the Gemini badge isn't just jewelry. It's a weight that crushes anyone who hasn't earned the right to carry it. The Templars are moving now, but there's a specific lack of coordination in their formation. They're insulted, and in this world, being insulted makes you predictable. He finally moves. It isn't a defensive posture, it's a predatory correction. Notice the micro-expression here. This isn't the face of a man fighting for his life. It's the face of a man conducting a very violent audit. The first strike lands, and it doesn't just draw blood. It shatters the Templar's collective ego. You've seen this pattern of confidence before in other chapters, but here, it's being used as a weapon of psychological exhaustion. He's baiting them into a specific corner of the chamber. Only those who have been paying attention since the start of the arc realize why that floor tiling matters. The shadows in the room are beginning to behave unnaturally. It's subtle, but if you look at the corners of the panels, the darkness is creeping inward. One Templar hesitates. That hesitation is the exact moment the power dynamic permanently shifts. He isn't just beating them. He's dismantling the myth of their untouchable status, one broken bone at a time. Pay attention to his eyes. The light in them isn't heroic. It's the cold glow of someone who has seen the bottom of the abyss and decided to move in. They try a combined S-rank maneuver. On paper, it's a perfect execution. In reality, they're just giving him more targets. The sound of the badge hitting the stone floor is the loudest thing in this entire sequence. He picks it up with a disdain that is almost physical. To him, this legendary relic is just a piece of metal he's using to make a point. This is the panel that broke the fandom when it first leaked. The sheer audacity of his next step defies every established rule of the Gemini Order. You're watching a man convince himself of a lie, while his body performs a truth he's not ready to admit yet. The reinforcement arrives, but the atmosphere has already been poisoned. They aren't looking at a criminal anymore. They're looking at a catastrophe. Speed is an illusion in this fight. He's moving slowly, yet he's already exactly where he needs to be before they even think of attacking. His internal monologue cuts through the noise. He isn't thinking about survival. He's calculating the cost of the repairs. The blood on the floor creates a map of his movements. It's a perfect circle. He never actually moved from his original spot. A new figure emerges from the back. The way the other Templars part for him tells you everything the dialogue won't. The tension here is a physical weight. If you've been following the lore, you know this specific commander shouldn't be here. The commander speaks, but the protagonist's response is a single, insulting gesture. This is where the psychological game begins. The commander is trying to find the crack in his resolve, but he's hitting a wall of absolute indifference. Notice the badge again. It's glowing. S-class relics don't glow unless they recognize a master. The realization on the commander's face is a masterpiece of horror. He knows what that glow means, and he knows he can't tell his men. Every strike now is a punctuation mark, short, brutal, final. He's not even using his full strength. That's the detail most people miss. He's still holding back at least 40%. The Templars are no longer fighting. They're surviving. There is a massive difference between the two. He steps over the fallen without a glance. They were never his objective. They were just the scenery. The real threat reveals itself in the rafters. You saw the shadow on. Now you see the eyes. Everything before this was set up. This is what it was building toward. The trap wasn't for him. He was the bait for something much worse. Only readers who caught the setup 3 chapters ago understand what just happened when he dropped his sword. The silence returns, but it's different now. It's the silence of a tomb that's about to be opened. He looks directly at the camera for a split second. It's a fourth wall break that makes you feel like you're the next target. He reaches for the badge one last time, but his hand stops an inch away. He hears a voice that shouldn't be possible. A voice from a character we saw die 10 chapters ago. He turns toward the darkness, and for the first time in the entire series, his expression is one of genuine, unfiltered terror. Choi Sung-hyuk doesn't move. He knows that in this game, the first one to blink is the first one to die. The name Gemini Bishop isn't just a title, It's a death sentence for anyone standing on the wrong side of the board. You can hear the structural integrity of the city screaming before the first blow even lands. Ares isn't coming to negotiate or occupy. They are coming to erase. Demolition is a crude word for what's about to happen to that building. It's not just about the concrete. It's about the message left in the rubble. Most viewers will miss the way the shadows shift before the impact, but that's where the real threat hides. The silence that follows a realization is always louder than the explosion itself. That single moment of hesitation from the guards isn't shock. It's the sudden, cold understanding that they are already dead. Yang Wei is coming personally. This isn't just a tactical shift. It's a psychological collapse for everyone in the room. When a man of his stature steps onto the field, it means the previous plan didn't just fail, it ceased to exist. Notice the way the light hits the floor here. It's the last moment of stillness before the vacuum of Yang Wei's presence consumes the space. If you've been paying attention to the power scaling since the beginning, you know this isn't an arrival. It's an execution. Every movement Sunghyuk makes is calculated to invite an opening that doesn't actually exist. He's baiting a trap that was set 3 moves ago. You're watching a masterclass in controlled desperation. The pressure in the air is visible now, a physical weight that turns breath into a chore. This is the panel the community has been arguing about since it dropped. Look closely at his eyes. That isn't fear. It's recognition of a familiar monster. The transition from strategy to survival happens in a heartbeat. The guys from Ares think they're the predators, but they haven't realized the environment has already been terraformed against them. The hunter who forgets to look up never sees the end coming. Sunghyuk's silence is a weapon he's honed better than any blade. By refusing to acknowledge the threat, he forces the threat to prove itself. It's a dangerous gamble that only works if you have nothing left to lose. Pay attention to this panel. You will not see this specific expression of vulnerability again. For a fraction of a second, the mask of the Gemini bishop slips, revealing the hollow core of the man underneath. The escalation isn't just physical anymore. It's metaphysical. The air vibrates with the intent to kill. Only readers who caught the setup from the earlier encounter understand exactly why the ground is cracking under his feet. The weight of the impending arrival is crushing the secondary characters into insignificance. They are no longer participants. They are scenery. The real tragedy is they still think they have a role to play. He's not looking at the enemy in front of him. He's looking at the shadow looming behind them. And just when you think you understand this character, he smiles. The door doesn't just open. It yields. Yang Wei doesn't need to announce his presence because the atmosphere has already done it for him. The chapter ends not with a scream, but with the terrifying realization that the exit has been deleted.